Hi, I'm Adrienne Green, and this is the Green Bean Podcast with Adrienne and friends. And I'm Adrienne Green, and we have our co-host for this season.
What up? This is Matty Cupcakes, Matt Weatherford.
And our guest for today is
Tumbleweed Smith.
Tumbleweed Smith. So if you are a listener for Cavis Country, you might recognize Mr. Tumbleweed Smith with The Sound of Texas that plays Monday through Friday. And we are happy to have him today to interview because he's at the beginning of his 55th year of The Sound of Texas.
That's right, 55th year as of August 1st, 1923, back from 69. I started in 69, so I'm beginning my 55th year.
Wow. And how long have you been in broadcasting overall?
Well, since 1960, I was just out of the Army, and most of my friends were like working. They had jobs. So I was just out of the Army and thought I'd try that for a while.
Wow.
And so I got a job at a little ad agency in Waco for about 7 weeks, and didn't know what was going to be next at all. Had no idea, but I knew that something would happen. Something always happens good. And so I had a call from my college roommate, who was assistant Chamber of Commerce manager here in Big Spring. And he said, "Hey, there's a guy here that has a radio station who's looking for a salesman. So why don't you come on out and see if you can get that job?" So I came out and got that job. and it was in radio all of a sudden. Yeah, and it was an eye-opener, man. It sure was.
So before you got into radio, had you ever heard that you have a radio voice?
No. Well, I was on stage a lot in college, in acting and dramas and plays and everything.
Wow. I've already learned some things about you that I've never known about you just now, Tumbleweed. I had no idea that you had served in the military or that you had done theater and plays. That's amazing.
I got all kinds of stuff for you.
Seems like it. Gosh. So what was the moment when you said, this broadcasting thing, I think this is it. This is it for me?
Well, I kind of always thought I'd be a writer, and I finally got the age to start writing. But when I got to the radio station, I liked all these dark rooms and lights and switches and knobs and everything, and I was fascinated with that. And so I said, "Hey, this is a cool way to go here." So I've been in that business, that line of work since 1960.
Wow, man.
I mean, just a true pioneer. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you've seen a lot of radio, a lot.
Yeah. I've seen it go from a lot of I'm familiar with Texas radio stations. I've been to a lot of them, but I've changed I've seen the radio change from a lot of mom and pop organizations to a corporate world, and I prefer the mom and pop or operations.
I do too. Well, what would you say during your career of broadcasting? What is your favorite moment that you've had since in all of your career?
Man, favorite one moment? Gee whiz, that's hard to. I've had so many. I just feel so lucky to be here. I guess.
Or one that's in your top 10 for sure.
One of the things that really anchored me to broadcasting was I was at a Texas Association of Broadcasters meeting one time, and they were handing out awards, and I had entered a contest for documentary and won the state award, and that was a big moment for me. At the meeting, my parents happened to be there, and they thought it was really neat, that I got recognized and all that. And golly, there's been so many. I mean, I just feel real lucky to be in this field and to have been in it for so long and done so many things in it.
So I imagine you've been able to help shape and mold some people that have come behind you. Is there anybody that you have enjoyed working with closely that is off the top of your head? You're like, I really enjoyed working with this person and getting to be a part of their growth.
Oh yeah, well I have a lot of heroes. Yes, I do.
Hold on.
Ace Reed.
What happened?
I think my battery's died. I'm so sorry about that. Let me switch these out real quick.
And we have little technical problems all the time in
That's
broadcasting.
what happens.
And in 67 to 69, and during that time, I had two broadcasters in my class who really made a name for themselves. One is Alan Delp, who created the first television emergency room drama. He now works for the Baltimore Sun in Maryland. And the other one was Jim Ryerson. Now Jim was stationed at Webb Air Force Base, and he became the #1 reporter out of KNBC in Los Angeles. And I'm sorry, it was KABC in Los Angeles, and he's now making films in Cuba. So those two, and then so many others have gone on to sterling careers in Chicago and New York and all over, and even in the Permian Basin. There are so many jobs that you can have in journalism. It is just amazing. So I had 2 years at Howard College, 34 years at UT Permian teaching, and then 3 years at Western Texas College in Snyder. I was at the museum in Snyder last night doing a performance. I do a lot of after dinner speaking and things, and it was just a room full of joy. I can make people laugh, and it was just a joyous occasion. I've spoken there a few times, and the room was full, and everybody laughed, and it was a wonderful experience. I do a lot of things. I do my radio program, I do my newspaper column, I make speeches, I do commercials, and I have taught, but I'm not teaching anymore. I stopped doing that in 2011.
Okay. So what brought about the program, The Sound of Texas?
What about it?
Yeah, what began it? What got that going and running for so long?
I was in my front yard, and I had put some gravel out on the front yard, thinking that would be a really great thing, and weeds started growing up in it. And I lived in Kentwood at the time, and there was a tumbleweed sticking up there, and I put down my shovel, and I went into the house and said, I'm going to start a radio program, and I'm going to call it Tumbleweed. And it's going to be about Texas features. And Susan, I said, yeah, I need a theme. So Susan sat down at the piano and picked out a little theme on the piano. And then I took that I recorded that, and then I took it to Dr. P.W. Malone's house. He had a recording studio in Nashville, a big one, and there was a guitar player at Dr. Malone's house, and he played that song that Susan had composed on the guitar, and I used that for my theme for a number of years. And so I had a program here. So I got 5 feature programs ready, and I sent it to 65 West Texas radio stations. The name of the program was Tumbleweed. And I had done feature work for NBC Radio for about 6 or 7 years, and I signed off my report. This is Bob Lewis reporting for NBC Monitor. And so I started my program. I would say, this is Bob Lewis reporting for Tumbleweed. So of those 65 stations, one station bought my program. And man, I was all set. I had a network. I had a station in Big Spring, KHEM, and in Littlefield, KZZN. Man, I was in business. 2 stations, and that was in August 1st, 1969. And so by the end of that year, I quit my job as a news director at KHEM Radio.
Oh wow!
And my wife was scared to death, and I was too. But by after a few months, we had 5 stations, and then it kept growing, and I started out totally unknown, going to these radio stations, trying to convince them that I had something they could make money with and gain an audience with, and thank goodness enough people bought it. I was able to move into our dream house in 1971, and we've been able to stay there. But people around Big Spring started calling me Tumbleweed because of the radio program, and I couldn't make enough money on just in the stations in West Texas that bought my program, so I needed to go statewide with it. And I understood that not every place in Texas has tumbleweeds, so I changed the name of the program to The Sound of Texas, and I became Tumbleweed Smith. That's my middle name, Tumbleweed Smith. And so it was on April 1st in 1970 that I started using Tumbleweed Smith, and the name of the program became The Sound of Texas.
Wow.
Well, that's real nice. Like, it just seems like you really you really knew what you wanted, and you ground it out until you got there. You know what I'm saying? Like, you found your niche, and especially for us, like the younger crowd coming in and stuff like that, and us as comedians and broadcasters and stuff like that, it speaks to us. You know what I'm saying? Knowing that like hard work gets you there.
Yeah, the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah.
That's the whole deal. I had a young person last night. He hung around after I had a lot of people come up and visit at the museum, and I noticed this young guy hanging back there, and other people would come up and we would visit, and we're still over there. I mean, it must have been 15, 20 minutes or more, that he was there. And finally, I said, I went over to him and I said, why didn't you come up here and, push some of these people away or something? And he said, well, I am interested in journalism. And we had a very nice conversation. And part of it was attitude and, perseverance. I mean, you said it, Matt. You said it. You just got to keep hammering at it. Okay? Keep hammering at it. And you're talking about some of the disappointing moments in my career. Yeah. When I got a no, when I was demonstrating a radio program to radio station managers and owners, and they would say, no, that's not for me. I said, well, I fold up my briefcase and go somewhere else. Yeah, and that was. I thought I had something really wonderful.
Oh, man. So after you started getting more stations to come on with you, was it just easy sailing after that, or were there some additional bumps in the road that you had to overcome?
Well, sure. I mean, any salesman gets a lot of no's, and so I thank goodness enough people said yes. Yeah. Yes, there have been times when I said, "What am I doing here?" I'm making a good living, but I need more. So I diversified.
Okay.
I started teaching. I started doing speeches, and so in this business, you need to do a lot of things, to have a nice life. And I wanted to have a nice life. I had 2 sons when I started my radio program. One was just 1 year old, and the other one was 5. So it was a big risk. Come to think of it, looking back on it, I would hate to start it right now. Because right now, I went from Big Spring to Colorado City to Midland to Odessa, Sweetwater, Snyder, town nearby. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness they thought I had a good idea. people in Big Spring thought I had a good idea. I can't tell you the encouragement that I got in Big Spring from the people here. They said, man, get after it. Show them what you can do. And that was it meant the world to me. It kept me going. I mean, that was encouragement. That was a really big deal to make me continue on this path that I had carved out for myself.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
I don't want to talk over
No,
you.
you're good. You're good.
I'm going to get put in the corner. You've seen a lot of technology come and go, I'm sure, over the years, like versus like the 60s to now. And, you know, like, how has that changed for you? I mean, have you pretty well adapted over the years? I mean,
Tried to stay up, and it's really hard.
oh yeah.
When I started, I had been in touch with NBC, and I wrote NBC and said, what kind of a tape recorder do you use? And they said, we use Telefunken. And so I ordered a Telefunken recorder and started using it. And that's a reel-to-reel tape recorder. And pretty soon after that, the cassette came along, and I started using cassettes. And then mini disc came along, and I started using mini disc. And then digital audio tape came along, and I started using digital audio tape. And then memory cards started, and that's what I'm using now. Yeah, so we've gone through a lot of generations of recording equipment.
Yes,
for
sir.
sure.
So has that come? So I'm assuming with all this new technology that you've gone through, you've had to take the initiative to invest in yourself, or was it something that was supplied to you by the radio stations that you had your show? So like, did you have to come out of your own pocket to purchase these new equipment, new technology to kind of continue?
Of course, I didn't get any grants or anything like
Well,
that.
I think maybe some people just don't realize that they have to invest in themselves if they want to continue doing what they do.
Another thing is not only the recording equipment, it's the production equipment also. I have been digital since '88.
Oh wow!
Oh, wow.
Started using the computer to produce radio programs instead of using a razor blade and a white pencil and a splicing block and splicing tape to splice tape. I mean, I did that for a long time.
You said no more.
Well, I don't know that the new technologies has increased all that much in quality, but it certainly has made it more convenient.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna come back for the last segment of the Green Bean Podcast with Adrian and friends. You're listening to our podcast with our guest today, Mr. Tumbleweed Smith. All right, welcome back. You're listening to the Green Bean Podcast with Adrian and friends. I'm Adrian Green, and we have
Matt Weatherford, Matty Cupcakes here.
and our guest today,
Tumbleweed Smith.
Tumbleweed Smith. So, Tumbleweed, I don't know that I've actually officially told you what the Green Bean Podcast is. So I kind of wrote it out some, but in our emails together. But the Green Bean Podcast is a celebration of growth. So growth in personal development, your craft, your business, just to inspire people to keep going, because there's someone out there that's like, man, I wish I was where Tumbleweed Smith is, where you could be, but you got to get started and you got to keep going. And it's all about celebrating the positives along the way and just overcoming those hurdles to get to where you want to go. Just being persistent, like you've mentioned, and just keep going. Just go.
Yeah, you have to know you're gonna do it. You have to know that you're in the right spot. You know, I'm gonna do this, man. I'm gonna do it no matter what it takes. I think the attitude is really important. Perseverance and the attitude. You know, you gotta. If you know you're in the right place. When I got out of the Army, I was in Europe for 2 years. Came back to New York Harbor, and people had bought good radios in Europe, and they were listening to it. And the first thing they heard was a commercial for a meat market, and people applauded. Those soldiers gathered around the radio applauded. they had not heard a commercial in 2 years. That's America. And that commercial was right in the middle of a newscast. That was my epiphany. I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing what I consider to be the most American thing, news and advertising. So my life was set. I was 25 years old.
Wow.
And that's when it happened. And man, I was so lucky at that age to realize what I was going to be doing the rest of my life.
Yeah, certainly. Not a lot of people have that. Not a lot, like people are still, in their mid-20s trying to figure out what they want to do. And I wonder if it's even more people now, because there's so many options. Like, I feel like, before technology made the world smaller, maybe people didn't realize how many options there actually were, because they just kind of saw their environment and what their families were before them, what their options were, and people around them, and now there's vast options for anyone to just pursue their dreams. And that's amazing that you just knew at 25. And
Yep.
You're still going.
Yep, I mean, I knew that. I just knew it. I mean, that was for me. That's why I went to work for a little ad agency in Waco when I just got out of the Army.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like the development of like social media platforms, like Facebook, Instagram,
You can't seem to stop it.
I know. I mean, TikTok is alive.
Oh, I know. It's a good thing for some people, It's not a nice way to communicate, I guess. I spend about 5 minutes a day on Facebook, answering the, whatever might come in for me. And I put my weekly program on Facebook. Next week on the Sound of Texas, I use it that way, but I don't use it very much, really.
Okay.
So speaking of Sound of Texas, how do you decide what your stories will be? How do you find your stories?
Oh, I work pretty closely with the radio stations and newspapers that carry my stuff. And besides that, I've got quite a lead file built up, over the past 50 or so years. And so I was in Amarillo last week. I was in Amarillo Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, came home Thursday. I came home with 17 interviews. And so those interviews are going to be on the air for the next 18 months. Every week I do a program from East, West, North, South, and Central Texas.
Okay.
And so when I'm low on Central Texas interviews, I'll go to Central Texas and get some interviews.
So people send you emails like, hey, there's this person, or I have this story, and is that kind of how you follow up on leads? Or
That's one way for sure. Thank goodness that people do call me and say, I've got this wonderful person who makes rope or whatever.
That makes rope.
And so thank you. Yes, I'll call them up. During COVID, I did make some phone calls, interviews by phone, which I don't like to do. I like face to face.
Right.
I like to look into the eyes of the people I'm interviewing. But I didn't want to get out, so I stayed home in my studio and I did a lot of calling, and that was kind of interesting. I got a pretty good program that maintains broadcast quality. So.
Okay. So you've kind of mentioned this already, and I don't remember if it was on the recording or not, but for anybody who wants to go into broadcasting journalism, kind of following, building the kind of career that you've had so far.
There aren't many people doing what I do.
Well, if they want to kind of go down that path, what is the advice you would give them?
Get some experience in a newsroom somewhere. Be creative, be innovative, be curious. If you want to do a longer piece on something, that's wonderful. if you, I mean, like when I was news director, I followed a flight training class here at Webb. Every Saturday we had a broadcast on what the pilots were going through in their training. And I also did a documentary every week on something. Somebody would come back from a trip, and I would interview them, talking about their trip. You know, in a certain part of the country, whatever. But you know, when Martin Luther King died, I went to a black church and recorded the morning sermon, et cetera, et cetera. You know, things like that. You have to have an open mind and be willing to look around all around you. You know, it's not just you know, the wrecks and everything like that. It's beyond that. It's really beyond that. It's having a vision to see what's out there, and I think to really record and report on life beyond the news. I don't think the news is really life.
I would agree with that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I really think there's a lot of influences that go into, like, what we see as news is what we saw as news 10 to 20 years ago when I, you know, was 18 and 19 and stuff like that, you know, like compared to now. And when I was in the service and stuff like that, I mean, I didn't really pay attention to a whole lot of news because I was living it, you know, but now it just seems like, who do you trust? You know, like, I mean, like, for as somebody that wants to watch the news, you know, like, you know, and I watch CNN or I watch Fox or I watch NBC, ABC, whatever comes on, you know, who's actually telling me what's going on without any bias?
You need to, like, be there.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And then even sometimes when you're there, you don't know what's happening.
It.
Yeah, it's difficult to sort out the, you know, separate the wheat from the chaff and everything like that. It really is. Yeah. I thought of something I was going to say, but I forgot what it was.
I hate that.
It's funny that you had mentioned, you know, who do you believe? Because you know, we do this day back in history, you know, KBS Country, and one of the things was, like, they talked about, you know, getting rid of the Fair Doctrine Act, which was like where everybody had to report the facts, you know, or both on controversial topics. They had to report on both sides of it, and now you don't have to do that anymore.
Oh, really?
And this is where we're at now because we don't have to do that, I guess.
What happened to the Fairness Doctrine?
Fairness Doctrine. Thank you.
Yeah.
So there's that, but yeah, my time that I've spent in news so far, the only things that I know to do for certain is just to give the facts, and you know, that's all you can do, so it doesn't lean one way or the other. But I always enjoy getting to hear people's stories, and it's kind of what inspired this podcast, is because I would get wonderful stories out of them, like just really emotional, heartfelt stories that just, you know, make you feel something. But I got to condense it to 2 minutes for the purpose of, like, you know, running the radio news. Yeah. And so I was like, man, I really want to be able to tell those stories in full, and that's how this came about.
And
good for you.
Thank you.
You know, like, I kind of think of it more as like two divorcing friends that, like, got together, like friends that were friends before, you know, were separate friends before, but they got together through you or something, and then you kind of have to listen to both sides of the story. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna spend if there's 1 hour of news, I'm gonna have to spend 2 hours listening to two different news programs and kind of go, okay, like, middle of the way is probably what happened.
Right. I can see that.
Yeah. I think you have to have a favorite newscaster.
Yeah.
So you gotta find one you trust.
Yeah. I found one that I trust, but I'm not gonna mention it. But
right.
That's controversial.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us today on the Green Bean Podcast. Thank you so much, Tumbleweed, for joining us. It's been a pleasure getting to talk with you.
I need to interview you. Come to think of it.
Again, I was gonna
I've done
say,
it once.
yeah, we've done it
But
once.
thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Oh,
This
thank
was
you so much.
just an awesome opportunity to meet a West Texas legend,
Oh.
you know, as yourself, man.
It's hard to be a legend, man.
Oh, I mean,
Living legend.
I know, living legend, man, and it just so informative to us. But anyway,
All right, well, thank you, everyone. You've been listening to the Green Bean Podcast with Adrian Green and friends.